For many, this is a déjà vu moment. It reminds them of the deadly war last year. This is exactly how it started. Israeli raids in parts of the West Bank, violence in the Al-Aqsa compound, simmering tensions leading to an all-out war that battered the Gaza Strip. Hello and welcome to the West Asia Post with me, Ghadi Francis. Tensions in Jerusalem are rising. Attacks and counterattacks continue in Gaza. For the residents here, all they want is a peaceful, holy month of Ramadan. But the escalation is eerily similar this time. And many fear that another war is just days away. Let's take a look.
This is what Jerusalem looks like right now. The streets are crawling with Israeli police. Forces are pushing worshippers out of Al-Aqsa compound. And Jewish far-right protesters are marching to the city's quarters. It comes just days after clashes broke out at the Al-Aqsa compound. Over 150 Palestinians were injured. Israel's worst crackdown in recent history. Some West Asian news outlets are hinting at a third intifada or uprising. So how exactly did things descend into chaos? Why are the Palestinians protesting? And what is the world saying about Israel's brutal crackdown? Tensions have been simmering over Israeli raids in parts of the West Bank. Last week, things went up a notch. Israeli officers unleashed a wave of violence on the protesters. Most of it was centered around the Al-Aqsa mosque, the third holiest site in Islam after Mecca and Medina. The Palestinian protesters were armed with stones, and Israeli riot police with flashbangs and batons. It was a no contest. Hundreds of Palestinians were injured. Israel's crackdown is not new. They have oppressed Palestinians, evicted them from their homes and moved into their neighborhoods. None of this is sanctioned by international law, and countries have swiftly condemned it. Things got worse after a recent rocket attack. Israel carried out airstrikes in central Gaza. After a rocket launched from the Strip landed in Israel. This now raises fears of an all-out war, eerily similar to the one that broke out last year.
Of course, all citizens fear the outbreak of war because no one wants a war. And we in Gaza are a fragile base that cannot withstand war. And our political and economic situation cannot bear to have wars.
What about the Islamic world? They have condemned the attacks on Al-Aqsa. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, called for international action to end Israel's barbaric attacks. Turkey, too, warned against threats to Al-Aqsa. Jordan also slammed what it called Israel's unilateral provocative acts. Amman even summoned the Israeli envoy to protest against operations. There was also an emergency meeting called by Jordan. It included most of the countries from the Arab world. They condemned Israel's actions in Jerusalem, calling on Israel to ensure that only Muslims can worship at the Al-Aqsa.
The first priority is to stop the escalation, respect the historical and legal status quo during the last 10 days of Ramadan, and to prevent the visits by Jews to Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, ensuring that what happened earlier does not happen again. And as I said, the way to do that is to stop the violations and respect the historical and legal situation in Al-Aqsa Mosque.
As bad as it looks right now, things could get even worse. The West Asian publications are present. This does have all the makings of a third intifada, and the violence could easily spread beyond Jerusalem. Currently, the situation is heading towards an escalation. The conditions are ripe for an explosion. Will this lead to an all-out war again? Only time will tell. West Asia Bureau, WION. World is one.
In focus is Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. a silver-domed mosque in the 35-acre compound. Since decades, Al-Aqsa has been a flashpoint. It is the most contested territory in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And this time around, there's no difference. In our next report, we tell you more about the history of conflicts at Al-Aqsa.
لبيك يا أقصى لبيك يا أقصى الله أكبر الله أكبر.
This is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, located in the old city of Jerusalem. This is a mosque that has witnessed violence. For decades, it has been a flashpoint, the most contested territory in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. From the Palestinian Intifada to the Gaza war, the Al-Aqsa has been at the center of it all. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is located on a hilltop, a controversial hilltop at that. The Jews call it Temple Mount, the holiest site in Judaism. The Muslims call it Noble Sanctuary, the third holiest site in Islam. The two religions have fought over it for years, and they continue to do so. The 35-acre compound was seized by Israel during the 1967 Six-Day War, a move that was never internationally recognized. Israel considers all of Jerusalem as its undivided capital, but the Palestinians consider it the capital of their future state. Currently, Jordan acts as the custodian of Al-Aqsa. This was agreed to by both Israel and Jordan in a peace treaty. They decided that the WION, for the Islamic Trust, would have control over matters inside the compound. On the other hand, Israel would control external security. Jews are allowed to visit the compound, but are forbidden from praying there. This is not the first time clashes have broken out here. In 1929, deadly riots broke out during the British Mandate, with Muslims rallying to defend the holy site. In 1996, an Israeli decision to open a new entrance sparked clashes. Over 80 people were killed in 3 days. In 2000, it witnessed a controversial visit to the plaza by a Jewish leader, Ariel Sharon. This was one of the main triggers for the Second Palestinian Intifada. In 2017, the compound was again temporarily closed. This was after 3 Arab Israelis fired at the police forces at the site. In 2021, the compound was the scene of clashes between Israeli police and worshippers, leading to the 11-day war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. Currently, Jerusalem is a city under siege, and not for the first time. From stories in the Bible to UN resolutions, this is a city forged in conflict. It has been destroyed twice, besieged 23 times, recaptured 44 times, and attacked 52 times. It has seen crusades, it has seen intifadas, and now those fault lines have been ignited again. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
From Lebanon to Iraq, we have a lot more lined up for you in this edition of the West Asia Post. But first, let's take a look at the headlines.
The head of Yemen's newly formed presidential council has been sworn in along with other members of the 8-member council in a ceremony in Yemen's Aden. The Israeli coalition government is facing a fresh split after Arab-Israeli party Ra'am threatens to quit after violence at Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Iran warned Israel on National Army Day against any action. President Ibrahim Raisi threatened that even the smallest movement would provoke a response. US President Joe Biden is reluctant to remove Iran's Revolutionary Guards from the terror list. This was one of the demands made by Iran before it returns to the 2015 nuclear deal. Turkey's opposition leader says that his power supply had been cut after he stopped paying electricity bills in protest at soaring prices that he blamed on President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The World Health Organization says West Asia has a 42% COVID-19 vaccination rate as it warns of new variants. This comes as coronavirus cases and deaths have declined regionally.
Lebanon is less than a month away from the elections. The country is currently going through its worst economic crisis in decades. But the biggest question remains, will anyone be able to lead the country out of this looming disaster? Will the upcoming elections bring any hope, or will it be yet another failure? To decode the elections, we talked to Ghadi Francis, a controversial candidate, a notorious journalist, and an anti-regime activist. Let's take a look.
Lebanon is going to polls this May, but will the polls change the future of the crisis-hit nation? To understand that, we need to look at Lebanon's population. Lebanon is home to both Christians and Muslims. Both communities are further divided into religious subgroups, the largest being Maronite Christians, Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims, a political makeup that has plagued the country ever since. The protests in 2019 were a sign of how people were done with the political class. We spoke to Ghadi Francis, a journalist who had announced his candidacy. But why is he running for the elections?
Okay, why did you choose to run for elections? Is there any hope for change, or is it a protest to the political deadlock?
It's both a protest to the political deadlock and trying to push for the hope, because it's not a conclusion having a hope or not. It's a decision. We should have hope because we should do something. Is the whole deadlock that we are facing going to be solved through elections? No, it's a struggle. In a long-term struggle, you have to pass through elections, and you can use it as a platform to talk to people, to try to convince people in a different path, and that's what we are trying to do.
After the civil war in Lebanon, Lebanon's leaders came together. They signed the Taif Agreement. This divided the government among the sects. The president should be a Maronite. The prime minister is a Sunni. The speaker of the parliament must be a Shia. While it was meant to transition the country into a post-war situation, what it did was allow the conflict to persist in Lebanon. The politicians separated their portions of the government, using the money to enrich themselves and their political class.
To the global viewer, what's going to change? Why is this election crucial, and why are the French, the Americans, why is the whole world is talking about the upcoming elections in Lebanon? Why?
It's trying to have what happened in 17th of October demonstration, have it more focused, and trying to politicize the popular anger, to try to direct it to a way that we hope and we wish and we believe that it's the path to solve our problem, which is a systemic problem and not just a mere changing a couple of people in government by others. The alternative is the alternative of a political system that is inefficient.
These elections are particularly crucial. They need it for aid and to show the world. And to show the world there is a way forward for Lebanon. For many, it is a sign of hope. Others, it is a sign of a looming disaster.
What are you running for? You're running for capital control? You're running for IMF? Tell us.
The difference in our economic approach to how to solve the crisis is first of all, on restructuring the whole economical body of interest in the country, and not just having a plan for the financial sector, not just to distribute losses, but to have an economy that is self-sufficient and that can, when having to distribute losses, distributing these losses not from an accountable approach, just having all of the largest depositors carrying most of the burden, that's self-evident, but more on having the capitals of the productive sectors preserved through the banking sector. And in order to have such an approach be feasible in the future, one should have the fight carried on facing the banking sector, who are refusing any burden to be carried by them, and the official political and economic stance of the government and the central bank.
Turkey has launched an offensive on Kurdish fighters in Iraq. They are targeting Kurdistan Workers' Party hideouts after Turkish Defense Ministry said that the party planned a large-scale attack against Turkey. Now this comes just after the visit of the Prime Minister of Iraq's autonomous Kurdish region, Masroor Barzani, to Turkey. We tell you more. These are the Kurds, a large, predominantly Muslim ethnic group. There are about 25 to 35 million Kurds in West Asia. In fact, they make up the fourth largest ethnic group in the region, but they have never had their own nation state. To understand the history of the Turkish-Kurdish relations, we need to go back to the early 20th century. The Kurds wanted their own nation state. The defeat of the Ottoman Empire paved a path for it. The Western Allies promised a Kurdish state in the 1920 Treaty of Sevres. But any promises of a Kurdish nation were dashed just 3 years later. This was because of the Treaty of Lausanne. This determined the boundaries of modern-day Turkey, but left no room for a Kurdish state in the region. Over the next 80 years, any move for a Kurdish state was brutally quashed. This brings us to 2013. The Islamic State was advancing in the region. They were striking parts of Syria and Turkey. Some of these were parts of Kurdish enclaves in the region. So naturally, the Kurds were drawn into the conflict. In fact, they managed to be at the forefront of it, becoming a crucial US ally in the fight against the Islamic State. But Turkey sees the Kurds as a threat. There is deep-seated hostility between Turkey and the country's Kurds. Kurds make up for 15 to 20% of the population. They were oppressed, and the use of their language was restricted. So, in 1978, Abdullah Öcalan established the PKK, also known as the Kurdistan Workers' Party. They called for an independent state within Turkey. Soon, the group started an armed struggle. And since then, thousands have been killed. Now, Turkey has launched another offensive against Kurdish fighters. The operation is dubbed Operation Claw Lock. Turkish jets and artillery are striking targets belonging to the PKK. Commando units also hit Kurdistan Workers' Party hideouts. The Defense Ministry claims that PKK was planning another attack and called the operation crucial to ensure border security. Turkey's crackdown on the PKK has gone hand in hand with a crackdown on the broader Kurdish movement. Erdogan even met with Masroor Barzani, the Prime Minister of the Kurdish Autonomous Region of Iraq. The Barzanis historically opposed the PKK. So, Ankara has found an ally in the Kurdistan Democratic Party, which has ruled the Iraqi Autonomous Region since decades. But the offensives have strained Ankara's ties with the Iraq government. Baghdad has accused Turkey of failing to respect its territorial integrity. However, this time Erdogan says Iraq is supporting its push against the Kurdish rebels.
I wish success for our heroic soldiers joining this operation, which we carry out in close cooperation with the central Iraqi government and the regional administration in northern Iraq. I thank the central government in Iraq and the regional administration for their support in our fight against terror.
West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One. Before we leave you today, we bring you a story right from the ruins of Syria, an iftar like no other. Sitting in the gutted buildings, breaking the fast, and hoping for peace and a united Syrian community. Take a look.
Today we are serving the people iftar in the city of Tadef, which is not far from the front line. We try to gather the scattered families that were separated by the war in this devastated area. The number of families here is approximately 600. We provided an iftar meal which consisted of a cooked dish, milk, drinks and sweets.
We are here to participate in a feast for the residents of Tadef, which consists of 600 families. We are located on the front line of the criminal regime to prove to the world that we are staying on this land. We ask the international community to commit to its promises, and we ask the Turks to liberate what remains of the city of Tadef and return its displaced people to it.
تحرير مدينة ما تبقى من مدينة تادف.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay safe. I am Ghadi Francis, coming to you from Lebanon, and you're watching WION, World is One.